I owned a taco shop for 20 years. The entire street was crowded because of my shop. After the SATs were over, I wanted to give a 20% discount to the seniors who were graduating on my new taco flavor, but my meat supplier sent me a notice. Due to the high temperatures, the cost of transporting frozen goods has increased. Effective today, the price of raw ingredients will increase by 30%. Items are available on a first-come, first-served basis due to limited quantities. It was the third time he had increased the price this year. Immediately after, my landlord and vegetable supplier also increased their prices as though they had discussed this in advance. I was furious as I questioned them, but all of them gave me the same answer. Your profit on your new taco menu is high. We also need to benefit. I was trembling in anger. I went back to my hometown and sent them a group text message. From now on, I don't need you to supply any materials to me. I also won't be renting the place anymore. After the SATs were over, I had just put on my promotional banner when I received texts from my suppliers saying that they were increasing the price for ingredients. The manager from the shop next door, Ben Scott, forwarded their text to me. Gabe came out with a new menu item again. Whenever he comes out with a new menu item, it sells like hotcakes. He'll earn thousands. Now that we have increased the ingredients prices by 30%, we'll earn some profit too. That's right. John, you're so smart. We'll earn big money because of you. Nancy, make sure you increase the rent too. Otherwise, you won't get much. When I read those texts, I was furious. My father passed on Anderson's tacos to me. We had been operating in this remote alley for 40 years. Because of our unique flavors, we also brought in a lot of business for the other shops on this street. Every time I came out with new menu items, my suppliers would immediately increase the price of the raw materials, as would my rent. I clenched my fists. I turned around and looked at my taco station. Smoke wafted up from the food, and the minced meat was glistening. It looked delicious. I had a lot of regulars, so whenever I needed to increase the price, I hesitated. This time, I really did not want to increase the price. The price for tacos could not be so high. I made up my mind. Just as I was about to call John Reed, Nancy Duncan showed up. Hey, Gabe, is your new menu out yet? You're a much better businessman than your father. What's the new flavor? Is it good? In the past, I would give her a few tacos. This time, I only nodded. Yes, it's good. Do you want to buy some? I can give you a 5% discount. Upon hearing that, she froze. Then, she scoffed and said, I can't afford it because of inflation. Prices for everything are so high these days. I'm going to increase the rent by $1,000 starting this month. I took out my phone and showed her our previous conversation. Nancy, you've already increased the rent once this year, and you increased the utility bills as well. I didn't say anything about it then, but it's only been 2 months. Are you going to increase it again? This shop's only about 100 square feet, and you're charging me $13,000 a month. It's the most expensive place on this street. Nancy said indifferently, Gabe, you need to know your place. If it weren't for my shop, no one would know about Anderson's tacos. This is the best spot in this area. You get so many customers because of the crowd, $13,000 is considered cheap. Her voice was very loud. People from the nearby shops came out and started to voice their support for Nancy. That's right. If it weren't for this shop, would you be able to even sell tacos? You have to be grateful. Nancy's been promoting your shop for you. You should know your place. When I heard them, I tried to hold back my rage. The restaurant on my left did not have much business in the beginning. The owner used to whine about how they could not even fork out money for their daughter's medical bill. I helped promote his shop, and I gave free guacamole for every taco purchased if my customers bought something from his restaurant. As for the cafe on my right, it did not have many customers when they first started. I promoted their cafe on my social media, and I did a bundle deal promotion with their drinks. It helped them find their footing. After their business got better, they no longer cared about me. I found Nancy's words the most baffling. She really thought that her little shop was the reason why my taco business was bustling. Nancy gave me an ultimatum. Gabe, I need to survive too. I have already informed you that I'm increasing the rent. Worst case, you can increase the price of your tacos. You just have to balance it out, and the money will follow. I looked at her glittering eyes as she swept her gaze over my taco counter. I said coldly, please give me some time to think about it. After that, I turned around and went back into my shop. I shut the door but left the small window at my taco counter open. Nancy sighed. She pasted the rental price notice on my door. I'll give you a day to consider. I won't entertain anything past that deadline. The surrounding business owners acted like they were concerned for me. They all came over to talk to me. I asked, since this shop location is so great, how about I swap with your location instead? They fell silent. Everyone knew that even though my business was the best, my shop was the smallest. People would queue up almost every day for my tacos, and my regulars would call in advance to place their order with a deposit to my account. They knew that if they ordered late, the tacos would be out of stock. My father operated Anderson's Tacos for more than 30 years. I had worked on it for 10. I could not let this business collapse. I created a fake account and asked Ben to add me to the group chat. He was one of the only ones who supported me. Ben, aren't you afraid of getting fired? Gabe, I wanted to quit for the longest time. These people are ruthless. They'll reap what they sow sooner rather than later. I read the text and could not help but snicker. Ben was right. They were hopeless. In the past, before we moved our taco shop here, my father and I went to visit many potential shops. Nancy came to us. She said she was at her wit's end, and she asked us for help. She needed the rent money to send her daughter to study overseas. When I found out that she needed money for her child's education, I immediately paid her 1 year's rent in advance. It was $8,000 a month at that time. I rounded it up to $100,000 for her. Back then, she thanked me profusely. She was less entitled in those days. John was a meat supplier. Whenever I came up with a new menu item, he would stand outside my shop and count the number of people queuing up. Then, he would say, "You're earning so much. Look at you. You just wrap tacos and earn thousands a month, while we're stuck doing hard labor for minimum wage." As for the vegetable supplier, Leonard George, he was always very afraid of unsold vegetables going bad. He went around selling his vegetables, but people did not buy much. I was the one who bought most of his stock from him, so he did not have to worry. However, when they saw that I was doing well, they became jealous of me. They kept increasing the prices and thought I was a pushover. My wife, Helen Anderson, was furious when she saw the price increase notice. The rent has increased again. Do they really think we're a walking ATM? Whatever we earn goes into their pockets. We work so hard all year long. I've had enough of this. I said reassuringly, "Don't worry. Let's just find a new shop to rent." She looked up at me. "Really? Did you finally consider it?" "Yes. I no longer want to entertain them." Helen was excited. Customers started pouring in at 10 a.m. So we stopped chatting and got to work. We did not get a chance to catch our breath until 1 p.m. When we were finally out of tacos, I took down the banner and uploaded an announcement on my social media page. "Sorry everyone, due to the increase in rent and prices for the ingredients, we're unable to sustain our business. We'll be closed for a week. We'll update you on when we'll reopen. Thank you." Immediately, we received a lot of comments expressing their sadness. At the same time, someone sent me a link. "Gabe, look. Some shops on the street near Gold Square are open for renting. They are giving a 50% discount on the first year's rent, and there are a lot of perks too. There are also 2 schools nearby, so the traffic will be good. If you move here, it'll be a lot easier for me to buy your tacos too." That's right. I've been to that area before, and it's a good location. There are many surrounding neighborhoods. The only downside is the parking, but the crowd there will be good for business. There is a morning market just behind the street. You should go and find out more. I glanced at it and thanked my customer. Then, I immediately called the number of the shop for rent. "Anderson's Tacos? If you're willing to rent from us, we'll help you to apply for 3 years' worth of rental perks. We'll give you a 50% discount on the first year, a 40% discount on the second year, and a 30% discount on the third year. We'll also give you a free advertisement space. Mr. Anderson, we welcome you to rent from us at any time." I discussed it with Helen. We closed our shop and went over to have a look at the new shop. Gold Square was just 2 streets away from my current shop. As I walked over, I could see the clean street and the rental banners hanging before the shops. The rental agent, Ned Smith, welcomed us. "Gabe, I'm a loyal customer of Anderson's Tacos. If you rent from me, aside from the perks I mentioned earlier, I'll also try to arrange additional rent relief for you. Come, have a look." He passed me a flyer and took me to the shop. This shop's close to the entrance of a nearby neighborhood, and anyone who's going to the market will pass by. When people walk to and fro from the market, they're bound to see your shop. Helen and I were satisfied with the shop, so we signed the rental agreement on the spot. Then, we went to the market located behind the shop. We found that the quality of the vegetables was really good, and it was a lot cheaper as well. Helen grabbed my hand. "I told Uncle Daniel about this. He owns a farm, so we can get our meat from there. It would definitely be cheaper than what John offers us, and it'll be fresher too. I made up my mind. I left with Helen. We were busy making arrangements until 5 p.m. When we returned to the shop, Nancy was there impatiently waiting for me. So, what's it going to be, Gabe? What's your decision? Also, why did you close your shop? I ran out of tacos since I don't have much stock left. I've thought it through. I don't agree with the price increase. We agreed back then and signed a 1-year agreement. You're the party in breach of contract. Nancy looked as though she had heard the funniest thing. She laughed and said, Gabe, there was a clause in the agreement stating that any rent increase resulting from force majeure would not constitute a breach of contract. Given the current inflation and the rising cost of living, these circumstances are beyond my control. It's both reasonable and legal for me to increase the rent. I knew she was trying to play dirty, so I sighed and pretended to be torn. Nancy, you're practically forcing me to shut down. Besides, I have 2 more weeks. If you want to increase the rent, you can raise it next month. I don't care. You better pay me for the difference in price for the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, you'll suffer the consequences. Nancy gave me an ultimatum and spared me another day. She had just left when John showed up. Gabe, I've prepared the stock for tomorrow. Make sure you pay me in full. We'll start charging you the new prices starting tomorrow. There's no need for that. I'm closing my shop for a few days. I need a break. I'm too tired. He was stunned. What are you talking about? I made all the preparations. That's not my concern. Did I even order from you? John was stunned. I had never talked to him like that, so he was furious. Gabe, you just wait and see. He left. Very soon, they started texting in the group chat. Something's wrong with Gabe today. I prepared a lot of stock, but he told me he didn't want it anymore. He said he's tired, so he wants to rest for a few days. He lashed out at me earlier. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. After this, I'm going to increase the price further. Serves him right for being rude. Nancy replied, don't be angry. It's not worth it to be angry over this. Maybe it's because all of us increased the prices that he's pissed. I'll teach him a lesson soon. Just wait and see. I was puzzled. I wondered how she was going to do that when Helen yelled, our water got cut off. Gabe, what are we going to do about this? So? We're moving soon. She can have a taste of her own medicine. Nancy sent me a text. Gabe, have you thought this through? I'm cutting the water off today, and the electricity is next. I already warned you. I did not reply to her. Instead, I called my brother-in-law and his friends for their help to move our stuff out tonight. At 6 p.m., I worked along with some workers they brought. I took everything, including the floor tiles. We worked until midnight until everything had been moved. It was fortunate that we were not near any residential neighborhood. Otherwise, we might have gotten noise complaints. The next day, Nancy, John, and the rest came over. A few of them gathered excitedly, but when they reached the shop, they were stunned. Nancy saw her bare unit and screamed, what happened to my shop? Where did Anderson's tacos go? The morning sun had barely crested the rooflines of the narrow alley when Nancy Duncan arrived, swinging her brass key ring around her index finger. She wore a smug, practiced grin, the expression of a woman who believed the world was an auction block where she held the sole gavel. Behind her walked John Reed, dragging a hand truck loaded with heavy cardboard cartons of frozen flank and skirt steak, followed by Leonard George, who was wiping sweat from his forehead with a stained rag. He's going to grovel today, John said, wheezing slightly as the hand truck rattled over the uneven asphalt. I kept the beef at the back of the freezer overnight. If he wants it thawed in time for lunch, he'll pay the extra 40%, not just 30%. He'll pay whatever I tell him to pay, Nancy said with a sharp laugh. I told him yesterday, no water, no business. Let him see what 100 square feet of prime commercial real estate is actually worth when the tap runs dry. They rounded the corner into the passage where Anderson's Tacos had operated for 4 decades. The crowd of morning commuters that usually gathered around the wooden pickup counter was nowhere to be seen. In its place was a stillness so unnatural that John's metal cartwheel sounded like artillery fire against the cobblestones. Nancy stopped short. Her hand dropped, the keys clinking faintly against her thigh. The storefront was gone. Not closed. Not shuttered. Gone. Where the heavy oak and glass service window had sat since Gabe's father installed it in 1984, there was only a gaping rectangular hole framed by rough, exposed 2x4s. The hand-carved cedar sign, Anderson's Authentic Tacos. EST 1984, which had hung from iron brackets above the awning, had been unbolted cleanly from the masonry. Nancy rushed forward, her heels clicking rapidly, and threw open the hollow-core plywood door that Gabe had left resting against the entry frame. She stepped inside and let out a strangled gasp. The shop had been returned to bare earth and raw cinder block. Gabe had not simply packed up his spatulas and cutting boards, he had dismantled every single improvement he and his father had financed out of pocket over 40 years. The heavy 3-tier stainless steel exhaust hood, imported from Monterey 20 years ago and bolted to the ceiling joists with industrial anchors, was gone, leaving only patched screw holes in the overhead beams. The grease traps had been professionally flushed, cleaned, capped, and removed. The customized gas plancha, the double basin sink, the undercounter refrigeration units, and the shelving units had all vanished. Even the hand-painted Talavera ceramic tiles that Gabe had laid across the concrete floor 10 years ago had been carefully chiseled up, boxed, and hauled away, leaving behind only the gray, dusty subfloor on which Nancy had first leased the abandoned coal shed to Gabe's father in the 80s. Pasted neatly in the center of the bare concrete back wall, right where the cash register used to sit, was a single sheet of white cardstock inside a clear plastic sleeve. Nancy tore it off the wall with trembling hands. It was a copy of the original 1984 lease agreement, signed by her late husband and Gabe's father, followed by Gabe's modern renewal rider. A bright yellow highlighter marked Section 14, Clause B. All fixtures, specialized ventilation systems, interior finishes, tiling, kitchen improvements, and structural apparatus installed at the sole expense of the tenant shall remain the exclusive personal property of the tenant, removable upon surrender of the premises, provided the space is returned in its original broom-clean condition. Beneath it, in Gabe's steady, clean handwriting, was a short addendum. Nancy, as per your notice of unilateral price alteration and illegal utility severance dated yesterday afternoon, Anderson's Tacos has vacated the premises. The shop has been returned to its original 1984 condition, an empty, unplumbed storage unit. Enclosed, find the keys. Have a wonderful summer. Gabe Anderson. 2 brass keys were taped to the bottom of the page. Nancy crumpled the paper against her chest, her face turning an alarming shade of mottled purple. He stole my shop. He destroyed the interior. John Reed dropped the handle of his hand truck. The boxes of meat slammed into the ground. He looked inside the cavernous, hollow space, his eyes wide with rising terror. Where is he? John stammered, grabbing Nancy by the shoulder. Nancy. Where did he go? I have 400 pounds of raw skirt steak sitting in my van that expires in 48 hours. He ordered it. He didn't order it, Leonard George muttered, walking up to the door and staring at the dust motes dancing in the empty space. His face had gone completely pale. He looked at his hands, which were stained green from trimming hundreds of bundles of cilantro and scallions that morning. He told you yesterday he wasn't ordering. You said he was bluffing. He was bluffing. John screamed, kicking the metal frame of the doorway. You can't just move a restaurant overnight. It takes months. Permits. Health. Inspections. Where the hell did he go? From across the alley, the glass door of the neighboring cafe opened. The owner, Marcus, stepped out holding a cup of espresso, expecting the usual overflow of taco patrons looking to buy cold brew while waiting in Gabe's line. Marcus looked at the empty space, looked at Nancy, and then looked down the empty street. Where's the line? Marcus asked, his voice cracking slightly. Nancy, where are all the people? 2 streets away, at the corner of Gold Square and Elmwood Avenue, the morning looked entirely different. The new unit occupied the ground floor of a handsome brick building situated between an expansive morning market and the pedestrian boulevard leading directly to 2 regional high schools and a municipal office complex. It was over 900 square feet, 9 times the size of the alley cupboard, with floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows that let the early light flood across polished terrazzo floors. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, charred poblano peppers, and rendering beef tallow. Gabe stood behind a gleaming 4-foot flat-top plancha, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. His apron was crisp and white, tied firmly around his waist. On the Prep line behind him, Helen was deftly chopping mountains of fresh cilantro, red onions, and ripe Roma tomatoes. Uncle Daniel's truck is backing into the loading bay now, Helen said, wiping her brow with the back of her forearm. She had dark circles under her eyes from the all-night move, but her posture was upright, her eyes bright with an adrenaline she hadn't felt in years. Gabe wiped the steel surface with a clean cloth and stepped out the back door into the private loading alley behind Gold Square. A heavy diesel flatbed was idling there, its refrigeration unit humming a steady, low baritone. A broad-shouldered man in denim overalls and work boots climbed down from the cab. Uncle Daniel had farmed cattle and heirloom crops in the valley 40 miles north for 50 years. Gabe, Daniel called out, extending a massive, calloused hand. Brought the first haul. Whole sides of grass-fed chuck, skirt, and heritage pork shoulder. Slaughtered Tuesday morning. No freezing, no transit markups, no middlemen. How's the supply looking for the rest of the month, Uncle Daniel? Gabe asked. As they unloaded the vacuum-sealed, custom-cut primals directly into the commercial walk-in cooler, a luxury Gabe had never possessed in the alley. As much as you need, son, Daniel said, slapping Gabe's back. And that farm gate cost. John Reed's been charging you $4 a pound over wholesale for meat he was sitting on until it turned gray. This stuff here was grazing in clover 72 hours ago. Taste the difference yourself. As they finished stocking the cooler, the front door chime rang. Gabe walked back to the dining area and saw Ben Scott standing near the front counter, holding a heavy cardboard box containing his personal belongings. Ben? Gabe asked. Ben looked around the wide, bright dining room, taking in the brand new oak tables, the stainless steel condiment bar, and the spacious ordering counter. A broad smile broke across his face. I told Nancy's brother to stick the inventory logs where the sun doesn't shine. About 20 minutes ago, Ben said, setting his box down. The alley is a graveyard, Gabe. Nancy is screeching on the phone with her lawyer, John is trying to sell rotting meat to the breakfast cafe for 50 cents on the dollar. And Marcus has had 0 customers all morning. I told you I wanted out. You still need a floor manager? Helen walked out from the kitchen, holding a fresh apron, and handed it to Ben. Without a word. $12 more an hour than you made over there, Gabe said, plus 4% of gross monthly revenue. You start right now. Ben took the apron, tied it around his waist, and let out a deep breath that sounded like 10 years of stress leaving his lungs. What's the game plan, boss? The prep is almost done, Gabe said, pointing toward the large digital menu board hanging above the register. We open at 10:30. Post the update to the social page. Let everyone know where we are. Back on Alley 9, 11 a.m. felt like midnight. Under normal circumstances, by 11 in the morning, the alley was a vibrant, noisy artery of foot traffic. High school seniors on open campus lunch would mix with city workers, bank tellers, and food lovers from out of town. The Q4 Anderson's tacos would routinely stretch 40 yards down the pavement, spilling onto the main sidewalk. Because of that queue, the surrounding businesses thrived on the scraps. Patrons waiting 20 minutes in Gabe's line would send their friends into Marcus's cafe to buy iced lattes. Others would duck into Miller's restaurant next door to grab sodas and appetizers while one person held their spot in the taco line. The convenience store at the corner sold hundreds of packs of gum, bottled waters, and cigarettes to people idling on the sidewalk. Today, there was no line. Miller, the owner of the small diner to the left of Gabe's old unit, stood in his empty doorway with his hands on his hips. The dining room behind him was pitch black. There was no point in turning on the lights when not a single soul had walked past his window in 2 hours. Nancy! Miller shouted across the alley. Nancy was pacing inside her empty, hollow unit, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. She was arguing with the municipal building department, trying to demand that Gabe be cited for removing his own kitchen hood. She lowered the phone. What, Miller? Where are the lunch crowds? Miller's voice was high and panicked. I prepped 50 pounds of potatoes for lunch rush. I have 3 line cooks on the clock. Not a single person has turned into the alley. They'll come. Nancy snapped, waving her hand dismissively. They don't come. For Gabe. They come to this alley because it's a historic food lane. They'll see The new sign I'm putting up, and they'll eat at your place instead. Nobody comes to this damn alley for history. Miller yelled, his face turning red. They come for the tacos. We were all surviving on his spillover. If Gabe's not here, this alley is just an unpaved ditch between two dumpsters. At that moment, an elderly man wearing a veteran's cap walked down the alley, squinting at the numbers on the walls. He walked up to the gutted storefront, stopped, and stared into the hollow room. "Excuse me," the man said, looking at Nancy. "Where is Anderson's?" "I've driven 40 miles from Oak Creek. My grandson graduated high school today and wanted 30 of Gabe's carnitas tacos." Nancy forced a bright, tight smile. "Anderson's has closed permanently, sir. But Miller's diner right next door makes wonderful hamburgers. Or you can try the panini at the cafe." The veteran looked at Miller's dark diner, then looked down at the dusty floor of Gabe's old shop. "Closed," the veteran muttered. He pulled out his smartphone, tapped the screen twice, and his eyes lit up. "He's not closed." He moved to Gold Square. "Opened a brand new shop an hour ago. Post says he's giving a 20% discount to all high school seniors and veterans today." The old man turned on his heel and walked briskly away without looking back. "Wait!" Nancy shouted, taking 3 steps after him. "Sir! We have other options. Here. You don't need to walk all the way to Gold Square." The man didn't even turn his head. Within 5 minutes, 3 more groups of people walked into the alley, checked their phones, muttered to one another, and turned right around to head toward Elmwood Avenue. Inside his refrigerated delivery truck parked at the end of the lane, John Reed sat on an upturned milk crate, holding his head in his hands. His phone rang. It was his bank. "Mr. Reed, we're calling regarding your commercial credit line payment for the refrigerated fleet. The automated draft failed this morning due to insufficient funds." John looked at the 8 pallets of perishable meat stacked in the dark truck behind him. He had maxed out his credit line to buy extra stock, fully intending to squeeze Gabe for every penny Gabe had earned from his new menu launch. Now, that meat was sitting in ambient heat as the truck's cooling unit struggled against the midday sun, losing value with every tick of the dashboard clock. At 11:30 a.m., the glass double doors of Anderson's Tacos on Gold Square were pushed open by a pair of high school seniors wearing their graduation stoles. "Mr. Gabe," the lead kid asked, poking his head inside. "Are you open?" Gabe smiled from behind the plancha. "We're open. Come on in, boys." Within 15 minutes, the quiet spaciousness of the new restaurant disappeared under a joyous, chaotic wave of humanity. The social media post had caught fire across the local community groups. Loyal customers who had spent years squeezed into an alleyway standing in the rain or sweltering in the summer sun were stunned by the new location. There were 70 indoor seats with air conditioning, broad wooden counters, clean restrooms, and a massive service window looking straight into the kitchen. Behind the counter, Gabe moved with the fluid, practiced grace of a master craftsman. He took a scoop of Uncle Daniel's pasture-raised beef, seasoned with his father's 40-year-old proprietary spice blend, toasted cumin, dried ancho, chiles, Mexican oregano, and sea salt, and laid it onto the smoking steel flat top. The meat sizzled with a violent, aromatic hiss, caramelizing instantly on the edges while remaining tender and juicy in the center. He laid freshly pressed corn tortillas beside the meat, letting them absorb the light wisps of seasoned steam before scooping the beef into double layers of corn, topping them with Helen's crisp, hand-cut cilantro, diced white onion, and a spoonful of roasted tomatillo avocado salsa. "Order number 12. Ben called out, his voice booming effortlessly over the hum of the dining room. 3 carne asada, 2 al pastor, 1 extra salsa verde. A customer took his tray, took a single bite of the taco, and closed his eyes. "Gabe," the customer called out across the low counter. "What did you do to this meat? It's unbelievable. Fresh from my uncle's pasture this morning," Gabe said with a grin, wiping down the steel edge. "No freezers. No transit middleman." By 1 p.m., the line stretched out the front door, along the clean sidewalk of Elmwood Avenue, and wrapped around the corner toward the morning market. Ned Smith, the commercial leasing agent, walked through the side door carrying a large floral congratulatory arrangement. He had to squeeze through the crowd just to reach the counter. "Gabe." Ned yelled over the noise. Look at this. I haven't seen foot traffic like this on Gold Square in 10 years. The morning market vendors just sent a delegation to thank me. They've sold out of 3 days worth of fruit and flowers because of the crowd you pulled in. We're just making lunch, Ned, Gabe said, flipping a row of marinated pork cutlets. No, you're anchoring the whole district, Ned said, leaning over the counter with a broad grin. By the way, I got a call from Nancy Duncan half an hour ago. Gabe paused his spatula for a fraction of a second. Did you? She wanted to know if she could list her alley property on my commercial portal, Ned chuckled, shaking his head. She claimed it was an iconic culinary landmark. I told her I wouldn't list that rat trap if she paid me up front. I heard through the grapevine that her bank held the mortgage on that alley building, assuming Gabe Anderson was locked into a multi-year commercial lease. Now that the space is empty, the bank called for an immediate reappraisal. Gabe said nothing. He simply turned back to the grill, scooped another mountain of glistening, perfectly crisped beef onto warm tortillas, and handed the plate to Helen. Table 6, Gabe said calmly. Let's keep the line moving. By Wednesday of the following week, the atmosphere on Alley 9 had degenerated into open hostility. Nancy Duncan sat in her empty storefront on a plastic folding chair she had brought from home. The dust from the ripped-up floor tiles still coated the walls. The smell of stagnant water lingered because the city water authority had placed a lock on her main shutoff valve pending an inspection of her unpermitted plumbing modifications. A shadow fell over the doorway. Nancy looked up, hoping against hope that it was a prospective tenant. It was John Reed and Leonard George. John looked as if he hadn't slept in 4 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt was rumpled, and he smelled faintly of sour vinegar. Nancy, John said, his voice low and raspy. We need to talk. I don't have time to talk, John, Nancy said defensively. I'm waiting for commercial real estate inquiries. No one is inquiring about this dump. John roared, slamming his fist against the doorframe. I lost $6,000 of inventory this week. The local restaurants won't take my meat because word got out that I tried to dump warm stock on Marcus. Leonard has 4 tons of rotting bell peppers and avocados sitting in his shed. We are going under, Nancy. What does that have to do with me? Nancy snapped, standing up from her chair. Gabe is the one who broke the lease. Gabe is the one who ran away like a thief. He didn't break the lease, Leonard said, his voice shaking with bitter regret. I showed the contract to my cousin who's a paralegal. Gabe had a month-to-month rider after the first year, Nancy. You raised his rent by $14,000 a year without 60 days written notice, and you cut his water. He didn't run away, you evicted him illegally. Shut up, Leonard. Nancy shrieked. No, you shut up. John yelled, stepping into the room until he was inches from Nancy's face. You told us Gabe was trapped. You told us he had nowhere to go. That his whole life was tied to this alley, and that we could squeeze him for whatever price we wanted. We followed your lead, Nancy. Now he's doing $12,000 a day on Gold Square, buying his beef from his uncle and his vegetables from the morning market, and we are ruined. Miller and Marcus walked out from their respective shops, drawn by the shouting. My lunch receipts yesterday were $48, Marcus said, his voice dead and monotone. $48. My espresso machine uses more in electricity than I took in. I'm handing my keys back to the bank on Friday. I laid off my 2 cooks this morning, Miller said, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. My daughter's tuition payment is due next month. I'm done. This entire street is dead. Nancy looked at the circle of furious, desperate faces surrounding her. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, a scapegoat, anything to avoid admitting that her unbridled greed had destroyed the very goose that laid their golden eggs. We can fight him, Nancy said suddenly, her eyes narrowing with malicious cunning. John frowned. Fight him how? He's legally operating at Gold Square. The recipe. Nancy hissed, stepping closer to John and Miller. The taco recipe. Anderson's Tacos isn't a patent. Gabe doesn't own a trademark on beef tacos. He operated out of this room for 40 years, people associate this location with the food. Miller shook his head. What are you talking about? We open our own taco shop right here. Nancy said, her voice rising with frantic excitement. John has the meat supply. Leonard has the vegetables. Miller, you have the commercial kitchen permits and cooking equipment next door. We call it the Original Alley Tacos. We hang a banner saying, under original management. We discount the prices by 40%. When people come back looking for Anderson's, they'll see the low prices and buy from us. John hesitated. Can we cook like him? It's ground meat on a piece of corn dough, John. Nancy scoffed loudly. It's street food. You think Gabe Anderson has some magical secret? My grandmother could make a taco. We undercut his prices, we bleed his customer base back to this alley, and we save our businesses. John looked at Leonard. Leonard looked uneasy, but the thought of his mounting debts pushed his doubts aside. I have 2,000 pounds of discounted frozen beef coming in from an industrial clearinghouse tomorrow, John whispered. Grade D trim, but heavily seasoned, nobody will know the difference. There you go. Nancy cried, clapping her hands together. We set up the grills. By Saturday, we take back what's ours. Saturday morning arrived with heavy, humid heat. Outside the old alley, Nancy had strung up a massive, garish yellow banner across the brick entrance. The Original Alley Tacos, the historic recipe you love. Under true management. All tacos $1.99 today only. Inside the hastily cleaned unit, John Reed had set up 2 cheap propane camping griddles resting on folding tables. He had thawed 3 large plastic tubs of industrial scrap meat, tossing them with excessive amounts of store-bought taco seasoning, garlic powder, and MSG to mask the dull, gray tint of the aged beef. Leonard had delivered crates of wilted cilantro and slightly bruised tomatoes that had been sitting in his unrefrigerated warehouse for 5 days. At 11 a.m., the smell of burnt onion and scorched grease began to drift down the alley. A few dozen pedestrians, lured by the aggressive $1.99 pricing and the misleading Original Alley banner, drifted into the passage. Is this Gabe's place? Asked a young college student, looking around skeptically at the folding tables and the bare cinder block walls. Same family recipe, sweetheart. Nancy lied smoothly from behind the cash box. Gabe retired. We're his partners, continuing the authentic tradition. How many can I get you? 10? 12? The student hesitated, bought 3 tacos, and walked away. By 1:30 p.m., they had sold nearly 200 tacos to unsuspecting passers-by. Nancy was counting a stack of $20 bills, her face flushed with triumph. You see? Nancy gloated to John, who was sloppily ladling greasy, gray meat onto cold supermarket tortillas. I told you. People don't care who's holding the spatula. They just want cheap food. Then, at 2:15 p.m., the disaster began. A woman walked back into the alley, her face pale and her hand clutching her stomach. Excuse me. I bought 4 tacos here 20 minutes ago. My husband ate 2 and he's vomiting violently behind your dumpster. Nancy's smile vanished. That's impossible, ma'am. Our ingredients are fresh. Before the woman could reply, 2 more people returned, both demanding refunds, complaining of severe abdominal cramps and nausea. Within 40 minutes, the alley was crowded not with happy diners, but with furious, sick customers. At 3 p.m., the distinctive wail of sirens echoed down the main boulevard. An ambulance pulled up to the entrance of the alley, followed immediately by 2 police cruisers and a white sedan bearing the insignia of the County Department of Public Health. A chief health inspector, clipboard in hand, marched directly into Nancy's unit, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Shut the gas off immediately, the inspector commanded, his eyes scanning the horrifying scene. What is the meaning of this? Nancy yelled, trying to block the inspector's view of the meat tubs. This is a private business. We've received 7 emergency calls for acute food poisoning within the last hour from this address, the inspector said coldly. He used an infrared thermometer on the raw meat sitting in John's tubs. This beef is sitting at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's crawling with bacteria. Where is your commercial refrigeration permit? Where are your hand washing stations? Where is your grease containment system? John Reed tried to back out the rear door, but a police officer blocked his path. "Sir, are you the supplier of this meat?" the officer asked. I was just helping out," John stammered, his voice trembling. The health inspector looked around the room, noting the bare concrete, the open gas tanks, and the lack of running water. "You are operating an unpermitted, uninspected, contaminated food prep site with no potable water connection," the inspector declared, writing rapidly on his citation pad. "I am issuing an immediate emergency closure order, a Class A public health violation citation, and referring this matter to the district attorney for reckless endangerment." As the inspector slapped a bright red condemned notice across Nancy's doorway, Nancy lunged forward, clawing at the paper. "You can't do this. This is my property. I'm Nancy Duncan." "Ma'am, step back or you will be arrested for obstruction," the officer said, firmly, taking her by the arm. From across the street, a crowd of onlookers filmed the entire spectacle on their smartphones. Within 30 minutes, the video of the health raid, the red condemnation notice, and Nancy screaming at the police was trending locally with the caption, "Greedy landlord tries to fake Anderson's tacos, poisons customers." 2 months later, the autumn air at Gold Square was crisp and sweet. Anderson's Tacos had become an undeniable institution in its new home. The lines remained steady, but with 3 commercial planchas and 4 prep cooks working under Gabe's precise direction, the service was fast, seamless, and joyful. Ben Scott stood near the front counter, checking inventory levels on a tablet. He looked relaxed, healthy, and wore a clean chef's coat with his name embroidered on the chest. "Gabe," Ben called out. "Daniel just dropped off 40 cases of autumn squash and heirloom chiles for the seasonal special. Everything's logged in." "Thanks, Ben," Gabe said, stepping away from the prep counter. Helen walked over, carrying 2 cups of hot spiced cider, and handed one to Gabe. They stood side by side near the large front window, watching the leaves drift across the clean brick pavers of Elmwood Avenue. Across town, the fallout from the alley collapse had concluded with mathematical precision. John Reed's commercial supply license had been revoked permanently following an investigation that uncovered dozens of undocumented, unsafe meat shipments. Crushed by mounting debts and civil lawsuits from the poisoned diners, his business was liquidated at public auction. Nancy Duncan had fared no better. The bank had foreclosed on the alley property after the building was declared structurally unsafe and commercially non-viable due to her unpermitted alterations. Unable to find a buyer or pay the accumulated city fines, she had been forced to sell her personal home to settle her legal judgments. Miller's Diner and Marcus's Cafe had closed their doors for good. The alley was now a silent, gated access lane used only for municipal trash collection. Meanwhile, at Gold Square, the community had rallied around Gabe with fierce loyalty. That afternoon, a group of 30 high school seniors from the nearby academy walked into the shop, laughing and chattering. They were wearing their sports jackets and club sweaters. The class president walked up to the counter. "Mr. Gabe, we came for the graduation prep lunch. Are we still getting that discount?" Gabe looked at the kids, then looked at Helen, whose face was radiant with a warm, peaceful smile. "Not 20% today, kids," Gabe said with a broad grin, picking up his spatula. 30% today. On the whole menu." The dining room erupted into cheers. Gabe turned back to the sizzling grill, where the pasture-raised meat danced against the hot steel, filling the bright, open room with the rich, honest aroma of food made with integrity, patience, and pride. He worked with calm, steady hands, knowing that no one could ever take his father's legacy from him, because a business was never made of brick and mortar, it was made of the heart, the honor, and the hands that built it every single morning.